Welcome to episode 22 of Talking Shirts. I'm Mike from Hull KR Shirts, and today we're going to take a look at this 1987-1989 Hull KR home shirt. So for this episode, I decided to take us back all the way into the 1980s, and this is the oldest match-worn shirt that I have in my collection. I've got a few other variations of this. I've got it in replica form, and I've also got a Colts version as well, where there is no sponsor across the front. So this shirt, as I say, it's the oldest shirt in my collection. This one was worn in the 1987-1988 season. Although in the 1988-89 season, we did get relegated in this shirt, which a lot of people seem to forget about. I think some people can tie a shirt to a success or even a failure. And I think often with this one, it's one that slips through the net. I think people often forget that the club got relegated in that season in 89, which kind of, to me, I don't let a success or a failure affect my opinion of a shirt, but I know that a lot of people do. So I do think that's one that kind of slips through the net when it comes to people's opinions on a shirt. So the shirt is obviously, it's a white shirt and it's got a red band across the front that does continue all the way around the back, which is not something we see so much nowadays on player spec shirts. We have to leave the gap on the back for the number, whereas back then we used to put a patch on the back, but I'll show you that as we come round to the back. So this shirt was used from 1985, or late 1985, through to 1989. It's probably most recognised for its handsome white print spawn set across the front. Now, you don't see too many of those available in a match-worn sort of setting. So I'm quite pleased to have one that has the Mansfield beers on the front, because yes, it would be great to have a handsome white print one, but there just doesn't seem to be that many around. I know a couple of other collectors who are quite eagerly looking for them, and they just, like I say, they just don't seem to be about. So if you've got one, you know, I'm interested to see it. It's always cool to see what other people have got. So Hull KRs have Adidas from the late 1970s through to the late 1980s, and that time on the pitch was probably the most successful in recent history, apart from obviously in the 1920s, back when the club was very, very successful. It was a great time for shirts as well. I think most of the shirts from the late 70s all the way through to the late 80s were absolutely beautiful shirts. They're iconic in the sense of that people now still sort of clamour for those designs to be reproduced and remanufactured, so that they can kind of have that, you know, that connection back into that time when the shirts was absolutely stunning and the club was very successful on the pitch as well. So you'll notice that the Adidas logo is stitched in here, and the Hull Kingston Rovers badge is also stitched into the shirt. None of this sort of sublimated stuff, and it's also not been ironed on patch either. Back then when they put a patch on, like with this Mansfield beers, it has been stitched on. So it's a separate fabric patch that has then been stitched on. So very, very different to what we would see nowadays. So I'll fling this round to the back. So this shirt was number 14, or is number 14 should I say, and it will have been worn off the bench. Now, back in the 80s, it used to be, okay, you're playing fullback, you wear number 1, and all the way through the team. So if you was the second interchange on the bench, or the substitute, you would be issued this number 14 shirt. So a lot of the shirts are a lot bigger than what you would expect, because sometimes it might be worn by a back and other times it might be worn by a forward. So this shirt here, as I say, the red band continues all the way around. However, there's a nice white big patch which has been stitched on, and then there's a number 1 and a number 4 which has also got its own individual stitching to get it onto the garment. And I know that this is from the 1987-1988 season, because I did a little bit of photo matching, which Neil Turner helped me out with, and the number 1 that was worn during this season looked exactly like this, but the number 1 that was worn in the last season of the old Craven Park in 88-89 had more sort of, it didn't have the edging on it, so it was a straight line all the way from top to bottom. I'll pop a picture up just so you can see what I'm referring to, because at first I thought this was going to be a shirt that was worn in the last game at Craven Park, or the old Craven Park. Unfortunately it's not. It is from the season before, but again, that doesn't just take anything away from the shirt for me, or the appeal that it has to me. So when you look back at some fixtures and the stats from the games back then, number 14 was worn by John Lydiat, Andy Thompson, and it was also won in a couple of games by Phil Hogan. Now, as a Rovers fan who wasn't alive during these times, to be able to have the opportunity to look back at some of these players, and for me to have a shirt that was worn by John Lydiat, Andy Thompson, and Phil Hogan, I'm really pleased to be able to put those names next to a shirt that I've got within my collection. So spinning it back round to the front. So in this episode, I've tried to go back to the 1980s. I know that it's a really strong time period for shirts, but also for success as well. A lot of the videos that I've been doing have been focused more on the modern shirts and sort of shirts that are maybe sort of from the last 5 or 10 years. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an active approach to try and have some more older shirts on for the next sort of 2, 3, 4 episodes. So make sure you're checking back. Also, if you look on the YouTube channel, you'll be able to see all of the episodes all the way through from 1 to 22, just in case you have missed any and if you'd like to catch up. Okay, so that's everything from me. I'll be back in a fortnight with another episode. Take care. Bye bye.